And welcome to Two Gray Goatees and a Whistle. I'm your host, Coach Huddy. I am joined by Coach T, Tyrone. How you doing, man? Also
I'm
joined
good, brother. How are
by
you?
our resident athletic director, Tanner Bauman. How you doing,
Yeah.
Tanner?
Hanging in there, hanging in there.
Love seeing your guys' faces, seeing you guys back on the show. It's awesome. It's been too long. So,
Yeah.
hey, so we got an interesting episode today. We are going to talk about the rise of localized sports academies and how is this playing into the future of youth sports? And is this something that is going to eventually replace traditional high school athletics? So to start out with, let's look at this from like 20 years ago. Let's look at the IMG Academy in Florida, for example. Okay. So we got the elite of the elite always went to this academy. That's where all your 5 stars. Anybody not know what IMG Academy is? It's basically a private school in Florida that has academics, sets up college programs, stuff like that to help kids get ready for college, but it's very specific as a sports academy. And tonight, that's our question. So let's have our first discussion about what is a sports academy. So when we look at this, people immediately think of homeschooling when you hear about sports academies, but there's a lot more to that. You have these academies that include online or hybrid academics. They have to have certified teachers, their strength and conditioning, position specific coaching, sports psychology, nutrition, college recruiting guidance, flexible schedules built around training. And many athletes are spending anywhere from 15 to 20 hours of training weekly. And then they'll do weekend tournaments. They have recovery sessions, film study, individual instruction. A lot of this is information that I'm getting is coming from like the Washington Post. When you hear stuff like this, what's your guys' thoughts on these academies? And is there anything you want to add about what sports academies are, what you guys think they are? How do you think they're playing a role nowadays?
I think I guess they're good, but like it's for the haves and have nots. What if a kid can't, I'm sure there's some kind of scholarship to help with the tuition to go there. But I mean, if a kid can afford it and that's what he wants to focus on, I don't think it's too terrible. But I think it kind of hurts like maybe the smaller schools that don't have that many 5-star kids because now they're losing really good athletes that could be part of their sports programs to this academy that's they're specializing on. So, I mean, there's good and bad to both sides, I guess. It's great for the kid if their family can afford it, and can send them away to Florida or Texas or wherever they have these academies, 'cause I heard that they're going to start one in Boise soon in Meridian
Mm,
area. They're supposedly
Well,
having one come.
Boise, they have something called the Idaho Academy
Hmm.
right now, but T, maybe you can elaborate on that because you know that kind of the world that's going on right now. I am hearing something about a possible charter school that might be something like that. Is there anything you can add to that, T or Tanner?
Well, like what my thoughts on the academies is those are fine. It's a lot like the Christian schools to me a little bit, where you could limit your enrollment and you have a certain idealistic, obviously like Christian schools, very religious focused, but these sports academies, you see them pop up in like hubs. So like Florida and I assume Texas, but I know like Utah has some of these and they're fine. I do think they give kids like maybe some more eyes or a different set of eyes. I think, in my opinion, where they would be like beneficial would be if you had aspirations to play college sports. You're kind of more in a college, like a college universe, I would say, in how you practice. But like I don't know if I'm an expert at this, just because where we live, we're so disconnected from the cities. Like we had a charter school pop up, and that was when I was in school, and the big thing they were going to do was have the same sports we offered, and that kind of all fizzled out, and one of their students became a really good football player for us. But in places like Boise, like big areas in Idaho, you see some of these Christian schools become dominant at sports, and it's because they could get certain kids in and they could provide scholarships. So one thing I would say about sports academies in Idaho, I believe our sports association, like our board, would be a little weary of letting one in. The other thing they would do is they would probably decide where they would place them. But I do think it's probably a way that a lot of things are going to move towards. I mean, right now, a lot of parents think their kids are going to be, the next LeBron James, and they're going to do everything they can to get them to there. So if you're a parent with the means to do that, that's probably going to happen. So that's why I think they're going to pop up. But I don't know. It's kind of out of my universe here.
Yeah. And I think that, T brought up the point, and we'll dive in a little bit more, is the haves and have nots, right? We talk about the amount of money that it costs to do this stuff. So like IMG was like 75,000 a year or something like that to just go to that school. And I'm sure there's some kind of scholarship available, but I mean, something for me to like compare that to would be, around here would be Sun Valley Community College or community school, the community school up there. I mean, it's expensive to go up there, but they do kind of specialize more in the winter sports type of stuff, but kind of the same idea. You the haves and have nots. We know there are athletes around here that do not have the funds to do stuff like this. And that is something we will talk a little bit more about, about the costs and stuff like that. The next step to this, or a hybrid from like a public school to like the ING, is what we call micro schools. And so micro schools is probably the fastest growing education model in America right now. And this, if you have small enrollment size offering about 25 students, personalized instruction, flexible scheduling, online curriculum, hybrid teaching, family involvement. Unlike traditional schools built around athletics around academics, micro schools are for athletes, often build academies around athletics. So instead of schooling at 3, the student day might look like academic instruction, weight room, recovery, skill training, club practice, weekend tournaments. So this is something else that's popping up, and this is kind of that in between what's going on with stuff like the IMG and traditional schools. So that's something else that's starting to pop up, are these micro schools. When we talked about IMG, boarding school, national recruiting hub, elite facilities, sports medicine, mental performance coaching, nutritionists, more than 15 sports, national competition schedule. Annual boarding tuition is $75,000. Examples of other places like ING that do the same model: you have the Spire Academy in Ohio, Combine Academy in North Carolina, Link Academy in Missouri. Is it Montverde Academy in Florida? That's a basketball one. FC Dallas Academy in Texas. There's a P27 Academy in Florida, the Barca Residency Academy in Arizona. So these are just a few places. And then there's a Shawtuck St. Mary's in Minnesota, and I think that's more of a hockey-centered school. So there are IMG models around there. It's not just IMG now. There are a few others from around the country that do have this specialized sports type of programs, but a lot of them are more specific to certain sports and not as a wide net like IMG. Go ahead, T.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say it was funny because I was looking them up, and I wanted to know more about these micro schools, and they were saying they're different from homeschooling because homeschooling your parents are teaching you, but with a micro school you have a certified teacher, someone that was in the field, that was in the career of teaching, that got tired of whatever they were doing there, and went out on their own, and it talked about the pay scales. But then I found out that there is a in Mount Hood here in Bend, Oregon, I think there is actually a school for like, I guess it's like regional, like how you're saying there's schools that are specified for different types of sports, not like IMG, but they're like snowboarding, alpine skiing, cross country skiing. They're doing more stuff like that because that's the type of sport that they do in that region. So I thought that was pretty interesting when I dove into it and started checking stuff out.
Yeah, and with Bend, I mean that makes sense because you got Mount Bachelor there. So that those type of sports, winter sports, that would make sense for that type of academy. I know in Idaho, we got the Idaho Sports Academy, and that one is located in the Meridian Nampa area and is a blend of academics and sports development. Students may continue participating in their local school or club teams, but there's a tuition of like $550 a month they pay, and the academy is specifically states that students can continue to participate in club and school athletics. And it's a flexible academic model they got. And I think they're more, from my understanding, it's more towards soccer and basketball. So that's the closest thing Idaho really has right now, I think, that is an operation of any kind of academy. So let's talk about the family part of this. Youth sports landscape and how it's changed. We talked about club sports. We know about travel sports, NIL opportunities, social media recruiting, showcase events, early specialization. I think we've all kind of we've talked about this on episodes about our thoughts on this and the specialization that comes with this. We know that realistically the chances of these kids moving on to play sports beyond high school is low. I mean, I shouldn't say depending on your sport. I mean, but because some of these kids can go to find some community college and get to extend their playing career in a sport. But the amount of money parents are investing, the thousands of dollars a year that they're investing on a kid on a sport, what's your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, I think anybody can do whatever the heck they want with their money, but if they truly are wanting their kids to get to college, wouldn't it be more invested to make sure these kids are in a library learning how to read and you know getting their academics taken care of? Because the academic scholarships versus athletic scholarships is, we know how much there is in academics, and I think there's this illusion or this, I don't know. And what's your guys' thoughts on this?
I don't know. I'll go first, I guess. I just think like with a boarding school, how much of the family environment, like how much access do the parents get to them? Like, if they're across the country in Florida and the kid's a stud athlete, let's say from Idaho or Oregon, and then, like what happens on holidays? I mean, do they get to go home or, what if logistics, they can't, they're paying all this money for that kid to go there. I'm assuming they can afford them to get to wherever they need to be for whatever they need. Like, what if it's a family that's strapped, the kid really wants to do it, they figure out a way to do it. But then what happens like on holidays or birthdays or big of family events or tragedies in the family? Like the kid's all the way across the country and they gotta wait, for them to get back home so they could be with their family. I think they're missing out a little bit on like their own family. I'm sure they make it like a family environment there, and that's probably what draws those guys there, besides the fact that they have access to all the finest, recruiting, physical fitness, nutrition, and all that sports psychology, all the things that they say kids need to go D1 and whatever and have access to that stuff. But like, what about the family side? Like you said, it's just, I don't know how that would look or what it looks like. Cause I don't know. I've never met anybody that went to one of those academies and I'd like to ask them and be like, so what's that like?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Tanner?
I think you see it like just in my realm, see it a lot with high school transfers. Kids will go to a different school than their siblings. And I mean, it's just becoming the norm. I feel like travel ball has conditioned these families to kind of give up time.
Right.
Like you have a weekend tournament in Anaheim, you can't make it, you send them with another family and they go and play and they have a ton of fun and maybe they perform. But I would almost say it's conditioned them to like time away isn't like it's not an alarm like, uh-oh, something's wrong here. We kind of all grew up in probably the same ideology of, you go to school, you work hard in your classroom, you go to your sport, then you come home after practice, you eat dinner with your family. If you have homework, if not, maybe turn on a game, you relax, but you spend like that family part was a third of your life. You had your school, your sport, your family. And now it's I don't even know what percentage you would say or fraction, but the sport aspect, and I believe it's from travel ball, in my opinion, has gone beyond, and it's ate into that family aspect and it's starting to eat into that school aspect.
Yeah.
And not for all kids, but for sure the family aspect's the one that's been getting hit just because a lot of people believe these showcase camps or these weekend tournaments are going to be the difference of Johnny in Georgia versus Jimmy in Jacksonville. So I just feel like the world of athletics has conditioned people to think it's totally normal to send my kid on a 7-hour flight away and I'll see him at Thanksgiving potentially.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's, to me, that's the shift that's happening is the sense of community and have community pride where you're at. I think that's going bye bye. And I think because travel ball's done this a little bit, because you don't have a loyalty to your school or your community, it's a loyalty to whatever program you got that might be. in another town. And, we constantly are hearing professional athletes. Was it Landon Donovan, the soccer player that used to who used to be on the U.S. men's soccer team? He was talking about that the way the academies are set up now, there's no way as a kid his family could ever afford anything like that. And Landon Donovan has been one of the best soccer players that the U.S. has had on their team. And you think about the lost opportunities that's going to happen if there's no way to kind of wrangle this in. And I don't know how you do it. I know they're talking with the U.S. government and Congress is kind of starting to pay attention to this a little bit. But again, it's like having the government come in and have one more thing, that they are tied into, it kind of makes you wonder, how do you control this other than going after the businesses that run these programs? Because looking at this from the Aspen Institute of Project Play, they found that average of $1,016 annually a family is spending on a child's primary sport. That is an increase of 46% since 2019. So just over the 7 years, it has jumped up that much. When you have all sports that are included, an average family can spend anywhere around $1,500. That's not including if you're the academy tuition, if you're taking that in, their club dues, private lessons, equipment, hotels, flights, gas, food, stuff that Tanner was bringing up. That's not included in this $1,500. So on one kid, you could be spending $3,000 or $4,000 a year for them to play a sport. If you can afford that and your kid loves that and that's something you want to put your money on, God bless you, man. Like, do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's how you want to spend your money and stuff like that. But if you're looking this as an investment, thinking that your kid is going to somehow be playing at a Division I school, let's realistically think about this. Unless it's football, basketball, baseball, hockey, what's another big sport? Soccer at some degree. After college, yeah, maybe that. Yeah. How much are you investing in hoping that these kids can somehow get at a professional level? We know how the chances of getting to the professional level is so freaking insane, to get that opportunity to do that. But parents are willing to spend this much money. And I don't know how realistic parents are in thinking that this is a good investment. So do you guys got anything to add to that, or something you want to tie to that, or, what's your guys' thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking, I was like, let me be devil's advocate here and like say behind the scenes, like let's say there's a 6'4" quarterback coming out of Gooding that's, can run like a 4.5 and throws 70-yard bombs like it's like he's flicking the booger or whatever you want to call it, and then we have this, and then like the behind the scenes side, I'm saying like boosters from big schools are like, hey, we know this kid that's out there in Idaho. What if we can get him to the academy? Will you guys take him to work for a school? Like all these big money people like that that have the funds to get kids to go where they need to go so they can be like, oh, we took him from IMG Academy, even though he was from Idaho, from a small school out there. He came to IMG and was able to afford it, and like it's just weird because like there's so much of that going on. They're basically like farm schools for big programs because I'm sure they're tapped into them, and all the big time coaches are at their practices or their games whenever they have them, or any kind of showcase, or like a spring game if they have one. All those big time school coaches are there, and they probably have feelers out there or people that are associated, if you will, with their school that are like, you know what, maybe we throw a couple bucks this kid's way, and because everybody's after the bag nowadays, especially with INL money, and some of those people have no scruples. They just want their school to be the best school out there, and they're willing to write checks for whatever, just as long as that kid comes there, and I'm not saying that's happening for real, but I just can only imagine what's going on in the background, for those type situations. Because then the school can be like,
Right.
we didn't know, we had nothing to do with it.
I can speak for something that happened like that when I was in school. I remember being in middle school and not back on
Mhm.
Pendleton, but there was things that happened at Pendleton. And so, Tanner, just to give you a little bit of background, okay, where I went to high school and where T's coaching now, we were obviously
Yeah.
rivals at the time. We were in the same division, but LeGrand had this girl basketball player, Laura Moore. She was one of the top basketball players in the nation at the time. And she had played all the way up through her sophomore, junior year. Next thing you know, she's over in Pendleton. And yeah, and I'm going off of stories, so I don't want to, well, this is all second, third hand. So I don't want to make this seem like that. This is exactly what Pendleton did and stuff like that. But it was said that Pendleton a lot of times would be like, we just had a job open up over here. Would you like to come take this job? And so those parents would get a job over there. Their kid would be able to come over, all this stuff. Hey, no transfer or whatever. Hey, mom and dad are working here at school, whatever it was. And to me, from my understanding, it was some kind of situation like that. And so even in public schools, we hear stories about, figuring out ways to get certain players to come over, and they try to find ways to get them around. So, I mean, that stuff has happened even when we were younger. That kind of stuff happened. But, just to throw it out there, if we're going to do the devil's advocate type thing. So, yeah, I think that you have all kinds of recruiting that happens, especially if you have the big kid and stuff like that. I'd be really curious to find out. And I think we would have to talk to somebody who plays professional sports. You probably could figure that out and kind of ask them, just kind of see if they'd ask around how many of his teammates either were on a lot of travel teams or went to an academy that are playing there, or did they go to how many did that route versus the traditional route. They went to their local high school, and they made it all the way to that level. I would be very curious to see, just because I think parents and I think that just the public needs to understand the athletes that we see on TV, especially on Sundays, when we watch those guys, what was their upbringing like? Were they playing multiple sports? Were they on travel teams? I think that would be a really good question to bring up, because I think it's distorted. It's been distorted that you have to go to these academies if you want to go play at the high level.
Just, I guess, if we're all going to jump on that side,
Okay.
you did mention the word loyalty earlier, and the
Yes.
world of sports is not loyal anymore. Not that it hasn't been, but like, in basketball, the super teams are the norm. In baseball, the money, whichever team has the money, they just brought in all the players. And, football's kind of been the one, there's just so many pieces. It's been a little bit harder,
Mhm.
but like and this might be against all the morals of this whole channel and this whole show, but with NIL, it's life-changing money, So I'm not speaking anything as fact, but I do know some of these private schools, if you're a really good athlete, they'll make an offer that will get you a better education on top of it, a nicer school. But sometimes they provide opportunities, for you in sports, but it might be a little extra. I think back to like the Cam Newton scenario, whether or not he took money and whether or not it was $800,000. If it was $80,000, that would change my life right now. Like,
For
that's
sure.
that's the one thing I would say in all this. Like, so with these academies, the one thing probably none of us are going to be able to talk about are the benefits outside, the gym or off the playing field, are they life-changing things? Because it may be that,
Hmm.
like, going to IMG may not make you a professional athlete, but maybe your aspirations are to become an agent and you get all this education and you build all these connections, So I do think
Great
if it's
point.
a life-changing scenario, I can't really fault it. So like I said, it may be totally against it, but I like NIL, I get why some of these kids make these decisions, because I am 33 years old and I would do the same thing, because it's a life changing, not just for me, but, for my family. And those guys are getting wealth that's generational, So
Mhm.
those are the things that I would say come into play here. Is it a decision that's going to help help change something?
But
Yeah, that's facts, Tanner. That's good
no,
stuff,
no,
man.
and I think that there's a lot to that, but the percentage of that happening. I mean, I think if we really to go back to this a little bit, it's like the investments that parents are putting into this with that hope of getting possibly NIL money. Maybe not even going pro, because we know that with NIL now, you don't necessarily have to go pro. You can go to college now at some of these schools, make 80, you can make six digits, something that was never a thing in college. And, like you said, it's life changing. but the percentage of that happening is still pretty small. And so when I look at the pros and cons of this, just in general, looking at the academies and micro schools and stuff like that, I mean, advantages you could have better time management because your athletics schedule is kind of built around this, and academics are kind of built around the athletic schedule. Having smaller school sizes, smaller class sizes, especially with the micro schools, more individual education, elite coaching in theory. ING is not going to just pick anybody to coach your program. I mean, I'm sure they have to have a certain resume to be able to get to that. Reduce class time distractions, better recovery, flexible travel, more recruiting exposure. Those are all pros that when you look at this. But then you look at the academic side of this is online learning as rigorous. What happens when sports become your identity? The burnout, we know burnout's real. If these kids are starting to play elite AU, baseball, because apparently that's elite, an 8-year-old's elite, are we, if this kid is constantly playing the sport and by the time he's 13, he's like, dude, I'm done. The burnout's a real thing. And parents, I think, not all parents, but you have these parents sometimes that drive this, that, hey, you need to be playing the sport all year round, outside of the injury concerns, the burnout thing, the mental side of this, and the family time. We talked about it. Every weekend you're in a hotel or tournament or traveling. And if you're a parent that really can't afford to go with your kid to Anaheim on a tournament, that's family time away. Your classmates, if you're doing these type of stuff, you're limited to that learning how to socialize unless you're around that, just people that do your sport. I guess that's one thing. It's you get some socialization, and then obviously injuries. Kid destroys his shoulder because he's been pitching since he's 9 years old, and by the time he's 14, his arm's shredded. So it's the pros and cons. It's like, what are you willing to do versus is it worth it? So, I think our perspectives on this, I think we're kind of limited because we don't know the situation, because even the people we know that have gone on professionally, they went traditional route, right? I mean, do you know anybody that went through an academy? We could talk about Colston,
Right.
traditional route, Andrew, traditional route,
100%.
so for us, we haven't, I don't know anybody who's gone through the academy type route to get their perspective. And I think that would be, maybe that's something I need to do a little more digging on, trying to find somebody who's done that. But, it's like the traditional route, you can get there too. And so it kind of makes me wonder, because I look at our two boys, I look at Andrew and Colston, and they weren't going to, I mean, they did go to camps and stuff like that. And both of them had a little bit different path to get to where they're at. But at the same token, it's like they weren't on travel teams in the off season for that particular sport. They were doing other things.
Colston did 7-on-7.
Yeah.
He did do travel 7-on-7, and he
did do that.
Won an MVP of the Pacific Northwest, and then he got invited to one. But he didn't only do that. So I'm not trying to. I'm more just I'm piggybacking.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, they did stuff like that. But again, they played basketball, or they did tennis, or rodeo or something. They did other things, and they still were able to go chase a professional dream. And so I really, when I'm looking at this, I get really hesitant because the haves and have-nots, like T said, come into play, and you're leaving out some pretty good athletes that probably just don't have the means to go to something like this. So the importance of public education, or going through, traditional paths of athletics, is still important. But I'm hoping, and this goes out to college coaches like that, don't forget to look at what's going on in high schools. I think a lot of times, and even I've talked to some college coaches, in the summertime when they don't have a sport going around, they can go catch a summer league travel tournament and get to see athletes out there. But, because during, let's say, softball season in the spring, it's going around the same time college is going on. So those college coaches don't necessarily get the time, unless it's local, get to go check out a kid that might be in, the middle of some small town in Oregon that could be very talented, but unless they're getting exposure through video and they have the means of a coach or a parent who's getting that exposure out there, getting real eyes on them is not happening. So, I think that's another thing too, is that when we look at college coaches, it's on their off season, they can go catch so and so here on a summer club team. All right. So I'm going to ask you guys this question, and this is hypothetical because not all of us here have kids. So I want to keep that in mind when I ask some of these questions for you guys. All right. So we're going to go, you can be yes or no. You can kind of add on to this, but it's kind of a lightning round of questions. Would you send your child to an academy? Let's say you had the means.
I'll let T go first.
If that's what they wanted to do, we'd have to sit down and talk about it, and then just make them realize what they're going to give up. Like, because like right now, Ellie and Mateni have their friends here that come over all the time, or Ellie goes over to their house and stuff. They'd have to understand that probably wouldn't be going on. They would be grinding to get, if that, and like that would have to truly be their goal, is the next level or whatever they wanted to do. But if that's what they wanted to do, I would send them. I would want to know that how much access I had as a parent. Like if I came down and I had the means to fly out there, can I go hang out with them and can I come watch practice? Can I, when they have dinner time, when they're not doing their school stuff and their sports stuff, do we have time to take them out to dinner so we can sit down and just BS about, hey, how are you doing? Are you making friends? I want to know these things other than like hearing them on the phone or doing like, a Skype type thing. I want to see my kid and I want to, I'd miss them. But if that's what they wanted to do, I would probably, again, we would have to talk to the boss and then see what she says. And then we can make a definite decision as a group for sure.
Yeah. All right, Tanner, hypothetically, if you had a kid, is this something you would do?
I'm similar to T. I mean, if that's really what they wanted, I mean, if you get out of the sports aspect of it, if I had a kid who was in drama or played band and got invited to an institute, that would be, give them an opportunity. I would totally do it. If it was academically, you see this, there was a NFL player played at Florida State. He got drafted. He was like a safety. He just got hired to be back in the NFL. Like in their like concussion team. His last name was Roll, like Samari Roll or something.
Samari Roll.
But
Remember him? Yeah.
he got offered to go to Oxford and be a doctor, like go get specialized training. Now, obviously later in life, but he got that opportunity and that was what he wanted to do. I will never fault that. So I think when you're a parent, if this is something your kid wants to do, especially I wouldn't do it in like, elementary, middle school probably. But if you're
Right.
talking junior, senior year of high school and it's, like something they're truly passionate about and they want to make their life, I think every parent wants their kid to be better than them. And every parent's going to do all they can to make that possible. So, yeah,
100%.
outside of sports, I would do it. So I'm like, inside of sports, I'd probably have to have the same approach.
Yeah. and the same thing. I mean, it's obviously for me, it would come down to my kid. Is this what they truly want? And like T said, you got to understand what you're giving up. I mean, sometimes if they're already living that life and they're on travel teams and stuff like that, and they don't really hang out with friends and stuff like that, it might be a little bit easier choice because they have that drive and they're already doing it. If that kid has that drive for whatever it is, whether it's athletics or, going the music route or whatever, yeah, I would definitely want to do that for my kid if I had the means. So with that, let's ask the next question. Would you coach one of these programs? IMG, or let's say Idaho started a micro school and they're going to offer football, basketball, baseball for these micro schools. Would you guys willing to coach one of these? IMG would be tempting because that's like the ultimate for me. I think for most of us, if IMG came calling and said, hey, we have a position here to coach women's flag football, would you come do it? It's like, okay, but you know what I'm saying, or anything. But what's your guys' thoughts on this?
You go first this time, Tanner. You tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm 100% in. I mean, like, one thing that I love about coaching is the staff, like the guys you're coaching with, you go to war with, like-minded people. And you're telling me I get not even IMG, just some school football academy, and they're like, hey, we're going to have you come coach D-line. And I'm with kids that are serious about football. a school that's serious about football, yeah, you're going to have some crazy parents. I mean, but the beauty of, to me, coaching in that aspect is it's just like college, just like NFL, where it's like, well, the best players play. Like,
Yep.
Yep.
sorry, that's how we approach it. The other thing is I try to approach all things at life like I'm going to get fired if I do a poor job. And sometimes I do a poor job, haven't been fired, but who knows? But, like that type of coaching, that probably is a part of it. Like if you're not successful, you probably get the axe. But I'd rather be thrust, like put in that spot and show what my capacity of a coach is. So I think like, I mean, that would be like a really cool experience just to be in something that is kind of tunnel vision. Like I love the multi-sport stuff, but there's something to be said about anything you're doing when you could just lock in and when you have like shared commitment from others. Like I think that would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
That's solid.
Yeah.
That's great
Yeah.
stuff. That's
Yeah. That's great.
good.
No,
Damn, that's
it's,
good.
yeah. No, that was great. All right. Do you think micro schools are going to be in the future? Do you think this is the future of youth sports?
Do I do I think it? I maybe because if you had like for instance, talking to our DC here, he has a friend that used to be a college wrestler, did really well in the field of wrestling, and went far in his career, college, all that stuff, and then post college, him and his wife opened up a gym or academy just to teach kids how to tumble, how to fall, and how to get custom with their bodies and how they move and stuff. And he says they are making hand over fist money. Like they're so big that in a couple years that they're thinking about expanding and like training people to do what they do so that they can have more clientele because they started off with just a few kids and it blew up because the success they're having with kids being more athletic and being able to be functionally ready to play sports. But yeah, yeah, man, it'd be crazy. It'd be crazy. Yeah, I don't know.
I think location will be a big part of it,
That
but
too.
as long as states are willing to let homeschooled kids even compete in sports, like why, like where's like until some controlling entity steps in and challenges it, I think it's just going to keep veering and veering that way. As a teacher, more and more kids they leave our school to go do these online academies, and they don't necessarily I don't know if you get challenged as much in this platform, but you could fast track things. So until like some governing body decides like, no, we're not going to allow this, like if you're like, you're not going to compete against our schools, then if you do start, one of these, but these micro schools, if there's nothing prohibiting them from competing with others, they're just going to keep popping up. I think, it's just the world we live in is especially T talked on the economics of some of this, businesses that are out there. So once money gets involved, it's like a wildfire. It's just going to go until somebody goes and puts it out. But if they're going to just keep letting it burn, so I don't think they're going away.
Yeah, man, I think like if you went through school, got educated to be an educator, and then you were coaching, we don't do it because it's going to make us rich, obviously. We coach it because we love the sport, we love kids, and we love what we do. But if you could take that and then get away from the school setting, have your own school where you're specialized and all you're doing is coaching, financially it's better from what I've seen. You can build your own school and all you have to do is football or basketball or whatever, and just get the whatever the requirements are for that state for the education side that they allow. And then you could, if you had some success, it's like Tanner said, it'd be like wildfire until somebody can, put you in a box and say you can only do this, you can only make this much money. And especially like I said, if you have success, because everybody wants to play for a winner and they want to be on a winning program, you have a couple kids have some success at your academy or your micro school where they focus academics number one, your sport number two. They're gonna
Uh-huh.
go there and they're gonna, you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? That's what
Yep.
they're gonna do.
Uh, Coach Deal coming out right there, dude. I remember Coach Deal. No, that was Coach Deal's thing, man. That was Coach Deal. He'd always say that, academics are
Oh,
number one, athletics are number two. So yeah,
yes, sir.
anybody who can't see us, we got the numbers opposite on our hands. Just to let you know. Anyways, so yeah, looking at the future, And I know there is some serious talk about regulations coming from Congress. I know there was a committee. Some of the people I've talked to, past guests, are working with this with Congress, and they're looking at it because of the price and the money machine sports is becoming. And they're like, dude, we are pricing parents and families out from sports, and instead of being about a learning environment and building relationships and teaching these kids how sports can relate to real life, it's all getting pushed out to you have to have money to do it. And it's pushing certain families out, the haves and have nots. Final two questions before we move on to our last segment. Has youth sports become too professionalized, I guess? Do you guys' thoughts on that?
I could go
I,
first
I
this time.
Go
go
ahead.
for it.
100%. I mean, I know I've almost seemed like to fall into the pro micro schools aspect on this, but it's totally way too professionalized and it's just lack of loyalty, kind of back to that world or word.
Mhm.
I mean, you really try to sit here and think what would take it back to what the normal was when even like 10 years ago. And the first thing that would happen is people would have to be okay with where they're at. Like too many people are okay with jumping ship, getting out of the suck and joining somebody who's already successful.
Yep.
Like that's the easy way out. And youth sports are becoming the same way. You see it in rec leagues. You see one rec team where every kid could, hit off the machine pitch and they could hit it for miles and they all could catch and they all could throw. And then come to find out that team's all, been like the older kids and they've all had the time invested to them. Like you see it
Yep.
there. And some of those other parents, rather than, all right, well, I'm going to, coach this team or I'm going to get my kid up to par, they're like, well, I'm just going to join that team and then my kid gets to be a part of that success. So I
Right.
think, and it's the same thing like NIL, if it was like restricted and even across the board, I think you would see a lot more people jumping ship for success. Right now, the money is what's driving it. So they chase the dollar signs. But like in high school sports where you're really not supposed to be receiving NIL money, right? They chase the success. It starts at the youth programs. Like if I could get on this travel ball team and, I mean, it's laughable to me where it's become, but it's because we look at a 6-year-old and be like, oh, they got the magic touch. They're going to be able to turn it versus like, why don't I just teach my kid the fundamentals? Like if
Yep.
I'm good at basketball, why don't I spend time teaching them how to dribble than say like, we're going to put you on a team with these kids that already know how to dribble. So
Right.
yeah, there's nobody, like there's no line that people aren't willing to cross in my opinion right now.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree,
Right.
Tanner. So here we had, because Ellie's she's like 10 years old and she's like 5'8", 5'9" already, right? And I
Elite.
had a guy approach me. Yeah, I had a guy approach me that was like, "Hey, your daughter should come play with my AAU team." And I was like, well, she's barely just getting into sports and she's just trying to feel it out. She likes it. I don't know if she loves it. And he was like, well, it'd be great for her. She'd get to play with some really good talent. And I go, but what if it burns my daughter out? And then she hates the sport. I would hate for her to experience that. I was like, let's let her get in that for a couple years. And then I'd gladly have her come play with your team. But just right now. And then what if she gets out there and, it hurts her because she gets embarrassed because maybe she's not as good just because she's tall. She
Yep.
gets out there and there's some kids that are like Tanner said are more talented. They've been doing it forever since they could walk. They had a ball in their hand, and Ellie is not that. She's just getting into the sport, but she loves it. I mean, she's pretty good at it. She still has moments where she goes for a rebound and it's like ducking and oh look what I caught because the ball's coming at her, but and but yeah, I think it's become that way too because and then they're all chasing the bag. They want to go to the best team that's sponsored by the best Nike or Under Armour or whatever company is sponsoring them because they get swag out of it and it's not necessarily the best team for them. And then they have players on there that kids are going to, like Tanner said, that may not ever get to play, but because gosh darn it, I was on that team, that makes me awesome. And so instead of them getting actual experience and getting better at the sport, they're getting the benefit of being next to a guy who's next to a guy that's the guy. So
Right.
that
And
makes me
and
happy.
you, that happens even at just in the traditional school sense. I mean, I can speak for this. When I was over at Gooding in middle school, we had a lot of girls come out for basketball that year, 1 year I was there. And so I talked to the AD at the time and I said, hey, let's not cut these kids. I will coach a B team because I'd rather everybody have this opportunity to get to play because they're middle schoolers. Let's not be cutting middle schoolers if we don't have to. So we did. We made a B team and we basically, they made their A team with their players and we took whoever was left and then we said, hey, we're going to have you play. And the kids, there were kids that were like, I am not going to play b-ball because they think it makes them lesser. And they look at it as, well, I want to be on the A team. And so the conversation I had to have with one of the girls, and she ended up playing for me. I sat her down and her mom, and I was like, listen, you could be on the A team. You're a bubble kid. You could be on the A team, sit at the end of the bench, maybe get a minute or two a game, or play b-ball, get all the freaking time in the world you're going to want because you're the best ball handler we're going to have, and you're going to get that playing time. You're going to get those hours in, whereas you can only learn so much from the bench. So it even happens even at the traditional level. The kids are like, if they don't make varsity or they don't make the A team or whatever it is, they feel like it's a letdown. And now this girl, she's playing basketball and she's getting a lot of playing time with the team, but she started out in playing B. And it's the development. And I think that's what we got to talk to parents about. It's everybody's looking at the outcomes and the shiny thing. And it's like, understand that if your kids can get developed, they're going to find that success if you can play the long game. And I think sometimes I think that's the point we had to drive the kids on that part of it. But to come back to what we're talking about with the, going at the next level, having that opportunity to go play for whatever. I mean, I get it, but I think parents need to have a realistic conversation. I think coaches, like the AAU coach, needs to have a realistic conversation about am I develop my team through fundamentals, or am I just trying to cherry pick the athletes where I don't have to teach them and I can just go play with a great team?
Well,
That's something that needs
just
to happen too.
just to piggyback off that, think of what these parents and kids see though. Like when I was younger, you would see movies, where it's like, we're not going to go join the good team. We're going to just get good ourselves. You got like the Mighty Ducks or the Big Green or Kicking and Screaming. You got
Bad
all
news
these,
bears.
yeah, you got all these
Bad News
examples
Bears,
of like, you
Little
embrace the
Giants.
suck, let's get better. Little Giants.
Yeah.
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 And now you see super teams, like you turn on the
Right.
TV, it's like, oh, we're going to put $800 million worth of talent on this team.
Yeah.
Or this team won the national championship. They had the highest NIL deal. Like that's the thing is like the stuff people are seeing is that they're seeing
Uh-huh.
like, oh, we just all go stand by this fire here and we're all successful versus like,
Right.
Exactly.
let's just build a fire where we're at, So I think like that's kind of a funny thing to me. Like when I was younger, I just remember you would watch a sports movie and it was probably all cliche. Almost everyone was like, oh, we're down. And then some parent or
Yeah.
somebody would be
They're
like,
the
but we could get
outcast.
better. We got to put
Yeah.
time in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
The
at the end,
outcasts,
they
and
would
then
win the big game,
they would win it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Right. And
And
I
you had
totally
that
agree.
feeling.
Yeah.
So,
No, and that's the thing I think that's missing because if we are to look at the pro side of this, I get it. If you can put a team like together and more championships, dude, hey, guess what? I got a championship. But the team, and so I think one of the knocks, if we were to just talk about this for a second, like we look at LeBron and stuff like that, because he was one of those that went to a super team, and players go chase the money all the time, but when you put these super teams together and stuff like that, to me, maybe that's traditionalist in me. I'm going to have a lot more respect for the teams that use their farm program or develop their program, develop these players, and then they understand how to develop them, and then by their third or fourth year, they're a championship type of team. They didn't have to go buy a team to win. I don't know, and I know, and so I think that's one thing we're battling is you see these super teams. It's like, well, if I can go be a part of a super team, I'm going to go do that. So
mhm.
yeah. Yep.
We have that going on right now, fellas. Check this out. So our middle school, and we're wondering why our numbers are dropping at the high school. Our middle school was playing like Milton Freewater, these small towns around here, and they were only having like 3 or 4 games in a season. So some parents decided that they were going to make a team of players that are going to play in the Tri Cities and play in the like Hermiston and play like in that Washington League because they're going to get better because they're going to play against better competition. But what happened is now those like bubble players, like Huddy said, that they're going to be a good player by the time they're a senior, but right now they're not as good as some of these other kids. So we're losing kids in our program throughout the high school. Like we have freshmen this year. I want to say there's only like that came out for football 20 something kids. And normally that's like 40 something kids that we have because some of those kids played for that team and some of them didn't. And when they didn't get the opportunity as some of these other kids, because maybe some of these other kids were related to the dad that was coaching or the dad's friend, you know what I'm saying? And then they didn't
Right.
get to play. So they were like, you know what? I found other things to do and I don't want to play football anymore. And then we catch ourselves in the hallway, like trying to recruit a kid to just come out and play and try it. And they're like, well, no, I want to do that. I want to go hunting. I want to go snowboarding. I want to do this. I want to do all this other stuff. But if had they just got the opportunity to play, they probably would still have the love. But because they got shunned because maybe they weren't the guy or they weren't the best kid, they got pushed to the side and they took all these kids that are better, if you want to call it that, and put them on this team. And then the cusp kids didn't get an opportunity. And it's hurting us at the varsity level because now our numbers are dropping every year from the classes and we're out like trying to find kids and we're like, holy crap, we've got 30 some odd kids, 40 some odd kids at football practice when normally there's a small army and there's an army standing on the side and we can platoon. Now it's not like that. Now we're like, if you're good, you're going to be the guy. There's hardly anybody on the sideline. Like we can barely go when we go scrimmage. We can barely fill a team because we don't have enough kids that can fill spots. We have guys playing out of position because we just have, hey, just go stand there. Here's a pad. Go stand there. And they may not be a D lineman or a linebacker, you know. So it's just crazy, and that's how it affected us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something that we have to get back. And I think we need to figure out a way that we're going to do it. And I don't know if we got to get higher ups involved to try to do this, but how we develop kids, stuff like that, I think we have to figure out how to make parents understand that there's a process to this and your kid is not necessarily going to have the success you think they're going to have if they go play with these people. And I finding out or figuring that out, I think that's a challenge right now because I don't think I don't know if there's an answer right now to that. All right. We're going to do our last segment. Mascot of the week, guys. Y'all ready for this?
Let's do
Yeah,
it.
let's see it.
Okay.
Either was off.
We are going to take you to Eugene, Oregon. All right. We're doing minor league baseball.
Oh,
Okay. All right. So alternative names. So we know in minor league baseball, we have alternative names that come out. A lot of times teams will do something to represent their area, whether it be a food staple or something, some business or some person that might have been a part of it, and they'll have these alternative identities. This week, we are going to talk about Eugene Emeralds, a high A affiliate to the San Francisco Giants baseball team. And what we're going to look at is the story behind this. All right. So there was a famous story that happened in Florence, Oregon in November 12th, 1970. This is about 70 miles west of Eugene. It's on the Oregon coast. What happened was a 45-foot, 8-ton sperm whale had washed onto the beach. The Oregon Highway Division needed a way to remove the carcass. Officials said, hey, let's use dynamite and blow it apart so the scavengers could dispose of it and the remains. Instead of vaporizing the whale, huge chunks of blubber were launched hundreds of feet into the air. Spectators ran for cover. One piece of whale crushed a brand new Oldsmobile parked in a nearby parking lot. Miraculously, nobody was seriously hurt in this, and the event became legendary because the local TV news crew of KATU captured the entire event. The footage has become one of the internet's earliest viral videos and remains an iconic piece of Oregon folklore. So, anybody got any idea the name of the alternative ID or mascot? Anybody want to take a guess?
Eugene Exploding Wells.
Yes, nailed it. The exploding whales. We
That's
have the
crazy.
exploding wells. Yep, the exploding wells. So basically, this is something that the design of these shirts and everything, the sketch design happened during the COVID era, and the club finally revealed them in 2023. The first merchandise sold out in 90 seconds, and orders were coming from around the world. The national media picked up on the story immediately. Fans were packing the stadium wearing these exploding wells jerseys. Emeralds promoted it, and they understood that they didn't want to create any kind of controversy behind this. So, with the work of the city of representatives in Florence, we talked to tribal representatives and researchers from Oregon State University Marine Mammal Institute, and they worked something out. So, when the club was promoting this part of their alternative jerseys, they're taking money from that and they're using it for whale research and marine conservation. So, yep, our
Crazy.
high A affiliation, Eugene Emeralds, also known as the Exploding Wells. That's it,
Damn.
guys. Yep. All right. I want to thank
That's crazy.
my co-hosts today. I want to thank Coach T and Tanner for being here. Everybody take care of yourself.